Hey everyone, Dustin here. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode, 3D Garage, Episode 8, The Red Sun. Let's get after it. Okay, so if you recall from the episode where I kind of went around and introduced the parts, this deck lid that we're going to use to mold has a rust spot through it coming. This deck lid that we're going to use to create a mold has some rust coming through, so we're going to take care of that now and repair it. So I'm going to take a roll lock disc and grind away. Okay, so that got rid of the rust. One thing to take into consideration here is we don't want to generate a whole lot of heat when we're doing this, because that could warp the metal, and especially on a surface like a hood or deck lid, very easy to warp. And now I'm going to take some 60 grit and just feather this back a little bit. This is basically a repair that I'm doing to hold up for a short-term situation, literally me creating the mold and that's it. If I were, doing this with the intent of it being a long-term repair, I'd actually feather this back a little bit more, but that's good for what we're gonna do. I'm gonna hit it up with some Bondo and we'll go from there. And notice I didn't say body filler. Yes, Bondo, we're literally using Bondo. I got this one day because it was a Sunday, I was doing some body work. Everything was closed except for Walmart and Harbor Freight, which sell this stuff. And I would not recommend using this on your car. There's a lot of other products out there. This stuff dries really, really hard. It does have some good uses in terms of if you're restoring a staircase or something like that, the knobs on a staircase, but this will work for this situation. So when you're mixing any type of body filler, the amount of catalyst you add is going to determine the rate at which it hardens or catalyzes. You also have to take into consideration how much work time do you need, what's the ambient temperature outside. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to work with the product a few times and get to know it, get to know how it catalyzes, but yeah, that's just something that you have to take into consideration when working with this stuff. This stuff actually is not, if you look inside the can here, it's not in good shape. It's been sitting for a while, but for what I need it for, it's going to do the job. That I would in no way put this on a car that I was going to be painting and hoping that it held up for some extended point in time. Using a metal spreader for this application because we just need a film coat. Alright, I think that's good. We're going to let that catalyze. Okay, so our body filler is started to kick, so we're going to feather it out with some 80 grit. Okay, this is just starting to feather, so I'm going to start working it down with 150. And I'm going to use a little bit bigger block too. Now we're going to finish this repair out with some 220. And since this isn't a super crucial repair, I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple coats of this sandable spray can primer on here. Okay, now that that's taken care of, the next step is to start wet sanding, but my garage is dusty, so I'm gonna spend the next few hours cleaning it. I'll catch you when I'm done with that. Okay, so a few days have passed since I last recorded. I took some time to clean up and organize my garage. It was long overdue since I started this project. By now our primer's dry, our repair is complete, and so the next step is to begin wet sanding this so we can prepare it for a mold. I'm gonna start off using 500 grit wet sandpaper, and I'm using this Warrior brand from Harbor Freight just because I have it. It's not necessarily the best. It's actually a little bit aggressive, a little bit more aggressive than 500. I'd really compare it to something more like a 400. But what I do when I wet sand is I take a sheet, fold it in half, fold it again. That usually creates a nice crease. And then I just tear the sheet like so down the middle. And then what I'll do is I'll fold it into thirds. And when you do that, it works really good in conjunction with this 3M 05517, 3M 05117 rubber squeegee. And then I'll put it in the bucket of water. So I already got one ready to go. And so we're gonna start wet sanding. And usually kind of the objective here is, especially in this scenario, is just remove the texture that's in the primer, get this really smooth, and then from there, we're going to work with progressively finer grits to remove the scratches that we're creating. So, yeah, here we go. You have to be careful when using these squeegees because digging in will create grooves, so you want to kind of keep even pressure throughout. And actually, I'm going to go over this with a softer block when I do get to some progressively finer grits. But that's it. We're wet sanding now. Also, I went and you can see on the floor, I covered the floor with some sheet plastic. That's just going to make any sludge that's created from wet sanding this primer easy to clean up. And also, I think I'm going to get a towel here so I can kind of keep this surface wet. Cool thing about the squeegee too is that you kind of want, oh, how am I going? What's my progress look like? You can take and use it like a squeegee, wipe off your area. Here we can see we still have this texture, so we're gonna keep sanding. It's probably gonna take me at least 30 minutes to an hour just to sand this with the 500 grit. So one question that I've gotten in the past is, how do I know when to change my sandpaper? Like, how do I know when it's time to replace, the piece is worn out and it's time for a new piece? And that kind of comes with experience. And there's also some other things that you have to take into consideration, like what brand sandpaper are you using? Like this sandpaper that I'm using here, what is this, Warrior? Yeah, it's really like a low quality sandpaper. You can't expect too much out of it. And because of that, you are going to kind of go through it at a faster rate as opposed to if you were using like a higher end. You typically think of 3M sandpapers as being the top of the line, right? And Norton being under that. But if you're using a higher end sandpaper, you're going to get a lot more longevity out of it. The other thing is experience. You got to just kind of know when the sandpaper is no longer cutting. And I guess really if you're kind of inexperienced, it's just change your paper, see if it's if it cuts any better, and you just kind of have to figure those things out through trial and error. And yeah, that's really what it comes down to. But we're finishing up with 500 here, and soon going to be on to the next set. Okay, so we finished up sanding with our 500 grit, and now we're going to move up to a finer grit. Typically, I would go with the 800 grit sandpaper, but when I went to the store, they didn't have any, and I don't have any here. That's why I went to the store looking for sandpaper. How do you open this? I'm truly perplexed. We're gonna cut it. So anyways, I did see this Hercules sandpaper there, though. I figured I was gonna try it out because I was really impressed with the dry sanding, those discs that I got. This actually reminds me of the Norton Black Ice Paper. If you look at the blue backing, wonder if that's what they were trying to copy. But this is 600 grit. We're gonna just make a light pass over the 500, and then we're going to go to 1000, and then 1200, and then 2000. They don't make 800 in this sandpaper. I'm kind of disappointed, but 600 to 1000, that works. You can sand 600 scratches out with 1000, no problem. So yeah, we're gonna get started on that now. Okay, so we're finishing up sanding with the 600 here, and just kind of wanted to jump in and tell you what I thought about the sandpaper. And no joke, this, if not, is either some of the best or closest to being the best sandpaper, wet sanding paper I've ever used. And here's why. So it looks like the Norton Black Ice Paper, as they would call it, but it feels like it has like almost a lighter weight feel, softer feel to the paper itself, like the paper that the sand is on, or the abrasive is on, than the 3M paper. And because of that, like, I don't have to worry about, like, are these edges going to dig in and cause little grooves or whatnot. And the paper, it's like, it got a really aggressive cut to it, but you can tell it's not overly aggressive to where it's going to be cutting, you know, when I say like that other paper that was 500 cuts more like a 400, like I can tell this is cutting like a 600, and I can trust that it's cutting like a 600. I wouldn't have to second guess what it's doing. Also, it lasts a long time. Like, I could have done this entire deck lid with 1/3 of this. I've just been changing it just to kind of see, you know, how this paper goes, the life of it. You know, it's a new product, I want to learn it, and yeah, I'm sold. I wish they had an 800 grit. 800 grit's a grit that I like to use a lot of times for like maybe aggressive, you know, cutting clear or something, sanding out runs. I don't make too many of those, but no. Yeah, so you could use this for that. The 600, you would have to be careful. We'll see how the 1000 works. I'm actually curious because this says that it's an aluminum oxide based paper, whereas the 1000 grit says that it's a silicon carbide. So I'm guessing that's going to act, you know, kind of behave completely different. But they say anti-clogging. I didn't have any clogging with that. Extra flexible. Yeah, this stuff is just super soft, tear resistant. Yeah, it didn't tear on me. It's durable backing. Yes, wet and dry. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. I highly recommend this. I'm sold. And it's about $1 a sheet, $4.99 for a 5-pack. So yep. Okay, so we're moving on for 1000 grit sandpaper. Looks pretty much just like the 600. Obviously the surface is different though, because this is silicon carbide versus the other one being aluminum oxide. There is one area that was of concern when I was sanding this, and it just feels really minimal, but this area where the repair is, it's not perfect. And I think a lot of it has to do with this primer that I use, just being a spray can primer. And I think what I am going to do is build this up with some polyester primer that's like on this deck lid and just kind of spot this area in. But for the time being, we're just going to continue on sanding. As this thing is drying out, everything else is looking good. I'm pretty happy with it so far. So some areas like this on these edges, they definitely need to be worked on a little bit. But yeah, let's keep going. Okay, as I inspect this closer, I can see this high spot coming through. But really, if you feel across this thing, it's got kind of ripples to it. And the reason being is if you look at what a deck lid is it's, you know, a piece of sheet metal with the frame underneath, and it's glued. And so what you feel when you sand, you kind of feel these glue spots coming through. I don't think my main concern is that this shows up and looks just as a sight for sore eyes when you actually mold the part. You see it in the mold. I do feel like this may be a little bit low, but adding some primer and wet sanding this, I think is going to take care of it. I think I'm worried about something that's really not a problem, but we're going to address it either way, just to be precautious here. Yeah. All right. Okay, so we're kind of finishing up sanding with 1000 grit here. I have, at this point, switched over from this hard rubber squeegee to this soft block, because at this point we're not trying to make this part straight anymore. It should be straight. The 500, 600 grit sandpaper should have straightened this out to as straight as it needs to be. The main thing we're trying to do now is just remove those scratches and remove any grooves or that may have been put in by that block, because those blocks can do that. Those blocks can do that, especially unintentionally, just by maybe pressing on a corner a little bit too hard. So I say just trying to keep even pressure, maintain even pressure, throughout the block is the best way to use that tool.